Hello, and welcome to Matters of Mind. My name is Thomas, and this is the last portion of a series where I'm going through Dr. Sowell's book, Social Justice Fallacies, one fallacy at a time. Today we're doing number 4, Knowledge Fallacies. So please like and subscribe, I appreciate it, and let's get right into the content. I'm going to start off, as I usually do, with a quote from the book. For many social issues, the most important decision is who makes the decision. Short and sweet. But it encompasses and really brings together the idea here with knowledge fallacies. Now, the first example he uses here is the difference between somebody who's a carpenter and somebody who's a physicist. And we tend to think of the physicist as more knowledgeable. And the problem, though, is, well, it really depends on the context. If you need a fence, the carpenter is probably the person that you need to build that fence. But we tend to think in society that a physicist is more knowledgeable. But, why is that? And I think this is why. So generally, the concept of us being different from animals has a lot to do with our ability for abstraction, being able to think in abstract terms. So when we think of a physicist, or we think of somebody highly educated who often thinks about abstract things, we tend to think of them as more knowledgeable. They have more knowledge. They're super smart. But as smart as some of these people are, building a fence, cooking my dinner, etc., they don't necessarily have the tools to do that. In their specific domain, just as in the specific domain of what I like to eat for dinner or how to build a fence, there's going to be different people that should be making the decisions on how to go about serving that purpose. The first important phrase to remember from this fallacy in this chapter is consequential knowledge. When we're looking for somebody who has knowledge on a particular issue, we shouldn't look for who has the most abstract, removed, intelligent take on something. What we should be looking for is who has the knowledge that has the best consequences within the context of the decision, the specific decision that we're trying to make right now. It's not always the person who has the highest degree or the highest IQ. It might be a person that is embedded within that specific context. A phrase Dr. Sowell uses here is an old saying: a fool can put on his own coat better than a wise man can do it for him. That's a simple way to remember that it doesn't matter how smart or wise you are, individual people have their own intricate details about their own lives that they can best serve their own purposes. Another thing Dr. Sowell does is he explores F.A. Hayek's idea of knowledge. Now, if you're not familiar with Hayek, he's the famous economist that wrote the famous Road to Serfdom. And actually, Dr. Sowell studied under Hayek, and in Dr. Sowell's Knowledge and Decisions, which a lot of this fallacy comes from, F.A. Hayek actually wrote the preface to that and said that that was the book he wished that he wrote. So I found it really interesting, and it was nice to see Dr. Sowell using some of his ideas here and explaining the concepts behind knowledge. Now, the one that he uses specific from F.A. Hayek was articulated knowledge and unarticulated knowledge. Articulated knowledge would be something that we have written down in a book. They're just facts about the world. Unarticulated knowledge may be something that people call common sense. And it can often be embodied in a culture. And it's things that we know without necessarily knowing why we know them. But often it's just knowledge that's so old and so tried and true and has been proven to be correct over so many years through empiricism that there's no need to, or people don't feel the need to necessarily justify that knowledge. Now, a great modern example that I just saw the other day was an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson. It was on trigonometry. Now, they pressed him a bit on some of the COVID policies and the idea that masks do or do not work. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a really smart, I think he's a cosmologist or a physicist, I'm not sure. but he does a lot of work in science communication. And he approached it like this. He said, well, it's pretty simple. All you do is you get a mask and you put the virus on one side and then see if it can pass through the membrane and get to the other side. And while there is some truth to that, whether or not a virus can or cannot penetrate that mask, there's a bunch that will be a great example of articulated knowledge. We can articulate the very specifics of the size of the virus and the filtration capabilities of the mask. But it doesn't take into account the unarticulated knowledge. And a public health professional would tell you this any day of the week. It's not necessarily just whether or not something passes by or through the membrane or the filter ability. It's how does that mask fit that specific person? Are they properly fitted? I used to volunteer and still work in healthcare. And if you don't know this, it's good to know that N95 masks, we would always have to get fitted correctly for them. They'd spray a little puff of scent, and if you could smell it, it's not fitted correctly, and they make these adjustments. So it's not like something you just throw on. So that's one piece of unarticulated knowledge. It also matters how wet those things get. How long are you wearing it? Are you taking it on and off? Is it an N95 or a surgical mask, which is even worse, or a cloth mask that does absolutely nothing? There's all these things that you have to take into account, and I think that was a great example of unarticulated knowledge trying to press something on us that doesn't really take into account all the unarticulated knowledge, all the common sense about how it actually plays out in the real world. I mean, even with kids, they had to wear masks in school except when they were napping, as if the virus took a nap during the 2 hours that they were napping. It's just really silly. So I think that was a great example of how often really intelligent people get so involved in the abstract that the reality of what they're saying just doesn't match. But we seem to get caught up in this all the time. And I remember, especially during the COVID pandemic, it was always the experts, talk about the experts. What do the experts say? What does the science say? And we were farming out all of our decisions to these experts, and questioning anything that they had to say was seen as almost like a heresy. And, in retrospect, a lot of what people were saying was absolutely correct. And it really reminds me of something I read in Plato's Republic. Now, if you're not familiar with Plato, the Greek philosopher who often wrote what Socrates was saying, and his own stuff as well, in the Republic, the idea was that there should be an elite group of people who are recognized as having that articulated knowledge that we talked about before. The elite, smart, well-bred people should guide the rest of us. And I keep seeing echoes of that. And I think that's why very often when it comes to our concepts and ideas of knowledge, we tend to get mixed up in forgetting that there are different kinds of knowledge. And again, that the best knowledge is held by the people that are directly affected by those decisions. And we should always make sure that we pay attention to them and pay attention to the fact that not all of us know everything and have all the knowledge necessary to make those decisions, especially when you're forcing those decisions on other people. So in conclusion, it's important to remember that there's different kinds of knowledge: unarticulated knowledge, articulated knowledge, and we have to remember that the decisions for individual people, even based on their individual dignity, should be and usually are best done at the lowest level possible. Thanks again for joining me here on Matters of Mind. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the comments. Bye.